Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Sarah Johnson-Karest. I am a Havens parent and a member of the Havens Parents Club DEIB committee. And it is my honor to welcome you all tonight to this event, Creating a Culture of Belonging, Student Perspectives on Inclusion, Exclusion, and Raising Kids Who Are Allies. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our moderators, but I wanted to just take a brief moment for us all to reflect a little bit on why we're here. First of all, we are here to listen with gratitude and open hearts to these brave students who are willing to share with us their experience so that we, the grown-ups, can do a better job and make this work. So let's just start by giving these students a warm welcome. Yes, we are so grateful to you guys. There's also deeper reasons that we're all here that are connected to each of our own personal values. And these are going to be different for each person, but just to prepare us to listen with open hearts to our students and to really connect with why we're here, let's just take a moment to take 2 deep breaths together. Okay. Does anyone from the audience have a personal value that pops up that you want to raise your hand and just share why you're here? Yes. Kindness. Did it feel a little bit vulnerable to share in front of a huge group of people something personal? Yes. So our students are doing that for us on an even bigger level. Thank you. Yeah, for me personally, this process feels very connected to my own values that are the same things that make me love Piedmont. Connection and community and education. Those values I think are something that I see everyone in our community sharing. I've made wonderful connections with all kinds of people here. I feel like my kids are getting a wonderful education. So in that way, Piedmont feels like a community that's totally connected to my own values. It also feels a little sticky, zooming out a little bit and reflecting on the fact that Piedmont was created on the basis of exclusion, both at a structural level and in individual intentions, and that's reflected in our present day demographics and in the experiences of many students in our schools. So we really need to do this work, and it's driven by our own personal values. I want all kids in Piedmont to have an excellent education, and that involves feeling connected and feeling like they belong. I want my kids to be prepared to be citizens in the 21st century, to understand how to interact with all kinds of people, to stand up for their friends, to stand up for the world that we should have, not the one that we have. So this is work that we really need to do. And I'm hopeful, actually, that the energy and values of this community can actually do something. Things are happening around DEIB work here in Piedmont on many levels. At the school district level, in the schools, there's change, there's community organizations working on this. We've had a lot of really wonderful experiences this year, just in the small work of our parent community. But there's specific work that we as the parents and the grown-ups stewarding these students need to do. And that's what we're gonna get to talk about today, and I hope move things even further forward. Our 2 moderators tonight are both shining lights that make me hopeful about this work in Piedmont. Jean Takazawa is a parent and teacher. And she has put her personal and professional heart and soul into this work for years, culminating this year in the new creation of the Affinity Mentor class, which connects high school students of various identities to lower school students so that they can have amazing, cool, awesome people to learn from in this space. So we're so grateful to Jean. And Ina Bendich works on restorative justice in the schools. And Ina has worked for years in our district to implement restorative justice practices in many ways. Restorative justice practices are a way of addressing challenges or differences by bringing people together based on shared values. We will get a chance to practice a little bit of restorative justice in our discussions later. So I'm going to hand it over to Jean and Ina. We'll hear from the students, and then after that we'll have a chance to all break out into small groups and think about what concrete things we could do in response to what they say. So welcome to everybody. Thank you to the students, and I'll hand it over to Ina and Jean.
Thank you for being here, for giving up your evening to come and listen. The way we're going to do this is we have 3 student speakers who will share on more of a deeper level the things that they want us to know as a community. And then after that, we will have questions that we've already prepared, and we will ask our panelists here to answer. So without further ado, we would love to invite Seb to the stage.
Thank you. Can you all hear me all right? Awesome. Okay. Like Miss Jean said, my name is Seb. My real name is Sohrab F. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a transgender student at Piedmont High. I'm very excited to be here tonight, but before I start talking a bit about my personal experience, I do want to acknowledge some of the things that Sarah was saying before, which is that discrimination is a lot bigger than just cultural. It's also economic, it's also systematic, it's built into Piedmont. So when we are doing panels like this and just focusing on culture, we can ignore those economic problems, which has been a big problem that I think Piedmont specifically has done. We use a lot of symbols, like we have a pride flag right out there, we do land acknowledgements, we name parks after people, but Piedmont still reestablishes a discriminatory system. So I want you all to keep that in mind. This panel should leave you feeling hopeful but not satisfied in your activism. This itself is a wonderful action showing up here tonight, but this is not the work. There is a lot more work to be done. But with that being said, I am going to jump into culture a bit. So one reason I'm especially excited to be here tonight is because today is the Persian New Year. And Salam Mubarak to anyone who celebrates. One awesome thing about the Persian New Year is that the actual day is reflective of how the rest of your year will go. So you start the year by eating something sweet so that you'll have a sweet year. You wear something new, that's why I'm dressed differently from everyone else here. I got this new shirt today from my mom, so we can start out a new year. So us starting out together is awesome because it's showing that this isn't a one-day thing. It takes a lot of persistence and a lot of work. So I think this is a great start to a new beginning, and I'm really excited that you're all here. So to talk a little bit about my personal story, I do need to get you in the mindset of a trans person a bit. Contrary to popular belief, I do not like being trans. I really wish I was born in the right body or was happy with the one that I have right now. Contrary to what the media may tell you, it is not for attention. And I did only come out about a year ago, so I have not experienced what it's like to be an out trans person in the Piedmont elementary and middle schools. But from their perspective, I can tell you they face a lot of crap just out of ignorance from their peers and from their parents. So sadly, I can't give you that perspective, but that is something that needs to be addressed. But I can give you the perspective of being a girl growing up in the elementary and middle schools, presenting differently and not according to my assigned gender. So I was insulted and bullied for presenting a little bit masculinely. And eventually I ended up becoming really feminine in high school, and that just did not work out for me. And then I came out. But what I have realized after coming out, aside from being misgendered here and there, which is totally reasonable as long as you apologize, coming out as a man has been a wonderful social and financial decision. I haven't been catcalled or harassed. People actually respect my opinions when I say, I mean, honestly, if I was still treated like a woman, I probably wouldn't have the balls to be up here tonight. So, yeah, I know a lot of you don't need a man telling you sexism is still real in Piedmont. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. But again, we might forget about it because Piedmont is run by some amazing women. So, but there is a lot of sexism still going on within the school. And that is very related to transphobia. If I had to be honest, transphobia is just sexism regurgitated and put into some new language. If I'm insulted on the basis of being trans, I'm insulted for being a dumb woman who thinks I'm a guy. If we insult trans women, we insult them on a sexist basis, and then we also call them pedophiles for being men. I mean, the only time we talk about women's sports is when we think that there's an alleged man among them. We don't care about women's sports otherwise. So I know that it's very important to teach your students about what it is to be trans and whatnot. But if you're reaffirming these hierarchical binaries that we have, if you're still telling your son to not cry and your daughter to wear a dress even if they don't want to, you're still creating a transphobic culture. You have to also deconstruct those binaries. You can't just teach them. And that's why I think in elementary schools specifically, that we still do see a lot of transphobia. Because, we all have gender, we all have gender presentation, we all have sex, and then we have a society that judges us based off those things. If we didn't judge people based off those things, then it wouldn't matter if they were trans, because we would just be treating them the same way, regardless. So I really want you all to think about that, and focus on not only promoting education about trans people, but also deconstructing those binaries within our students and within our Piedmont culture. Because even though we have some lovely, wonderful, amazing leading women, we still do have a very strict construct of what womanhood and what masculinity is. So thank you all for listening to me. I'm actually now going to give the microphone to a woman talking about giving light to women. So please give a warm welcome to my friend, Stephanie Sung.
Okay, hi everyone. That was amazing, Seb. So I'm just gonna get right into it. My name's Stephanie and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm Chinese American. So I only moved to Piedmont 2 years ago, but I moved all the way from Hong Kong. And I still remember the day I landed and how excited I was. I daydreamed about trips to Target, eating Chick-fil-A, and other luxuries I can only experience here. Yet, as I met my new peers at Piedmont High, I remember so many of them telling me, just wait, you'll start to hate it here. I was so confused. I couldn't comprehend how such a beautiful place could be hated by people who were living such privileged lives. The picture-perfect neighborhood, an academically rigorous school, and the express commitment to promoting diversity. However, I started noticing the strange stares and odd remarks I would receive in class. A subtle, you must be amazing at math, a casual, how come your English isn't more broken, or even an insulting, have you ever tried eating dog? A teacher constantly mixing up the names of the only 2 Asian girls in the room, and on the street, you're an Oriental, aren't you? Let me guess, you're from Japan? Each time I would smile and respond the automated responses I had for all of these questions. I didn't understand what was wrong or why they made me so uncomfortable. I would tell myself my peers weren't intentionally trying to be discriminatory or make me feel like I'm different from them, but they did anyway. I soon began to understand why people warned me about Piedmont. Something felt off in the way diversity was promoted, like it was a bandage too small for a huge cut. Having moved from Hong Kong has actually allowed me to experience discrimination here with a more mature lens and different perspective than others. Moving from a country where I was part of the majority to a new home where I'm now part of the minority, I began to see these microaggressions more distinctly. I will never understand how people have the guts to assume anything about my skills because of the size of my eyes. I will never know how they have the audacity to come up to me and start questioning my identity like I'm a dog they're trying to guess the breed of. I do realize people aren't intentionally trying to offend me, but when people look at Asians and ask questions like, "Where are you from?" "No, where are you really from?" they reduce us to just stereotypes about our race. It's important to understand the underlying negative impacts these stereotypes might have. They make students of color feel like we don't belong, that we're not American enough, and that we're non-distinguishable from the mass of other faces that resemble our own. I imagine that people who make these assumptions are fascinated with what is different, perhaps stemming from a need to dissect, define, and categorize people so that others fit into their worldview, without an authentic desire to learn about the ways in which we are diverse below the surface, and rather than seeing our shared human experience. And whether they see diversity as captivating or inferior, both are harmful. And us versus them mentality is damaging to all of us. I've learned to not let ignorant comments like these get the best of me, but this exhausting regular occurrence could be avoided if people were more aware of the meaning behind their harmful words. Why do I have to bear the burden of smiling and responding to these ignorant questions so many people ask me? The fake plastered concern for diversity and surface level interactions are no longer enough. As a community, we need to acknowledge that the wound of discrimination is still open and continues to make students of color feel isolated and devalued every day. We need to help our students see what I have learned. I've come to understand that I am not defined by how others see me or what they want to hear. Only I can define myself through my experiences and values. Yes, I am Chinese. Every night, dinner is served at the table with flavorful dishes that we all share, and my sister and I jump on the couch to watch Chinese movies and shows with my parents after. I celebrate Lunar New Year every year with poon choy, dumplings, and red envelopes I save for special occasions. On the official New Year's Day, I don't wash my hair or sweep the floors as to not rinse away my good luck, and that night I sleep with a filled red envelope under my pillow to ensure prosperity. These things are part of my Asian identity, but I am American too. I too have watched all the classic Adam Sandler movies and TV shows like Gossip Girl. I speak fluent English and celebrate Thanksgiving and the 4th of July with my friends. I go to football and soccer games and scream behind the stands as Piedmont scores. So when people try to confine me to a stereotypical box through passive-aggressive statements and disrespectful innuendos, I remember that I am so much more than anyone's assumptions or expectations. It seems that the weak bandage covering the deep-rooted history of racism in Piedmont is finally falling off, and today we are here to expose the truth of what that wound feels like to students of color who are affected by discrimination. We are gathered here to rip off that band-aid to allow real healing to occur. As a community, we need to practice mutual respect, ask authentic questions in pursuit of deeper understanding, be aware of the implications behind our words, recognize that intent and impact are not always aligned, and hold others accountable for the harm they cause. It is only by working together as a whole to truly honor individual and cultural diversity that we can actually heal the cut rather than just simply hiding it. Thank you. Sorry. Give it up for Morgan, everybody.
Thank you. Oh, so true. Okay. Good evening. My name is Morgan Hunt, and I just want to speak a little bit about Piedmont and how living here has affected me. I feel like I've stood up here plenty of times this year, especially during the Martin Luther King event, and especially when we went and we did a walkout because of an incident that happened at Millennium, and it still feels like not a lot has changed. Now that I'm a senior at Piedmont High School, it has truly forced me to look back on my experience and to process and heal the wounds that have been caused by this environment. As a Black woman growing up in a white community, I had extremely low self-esteem. This was due to constant microaggressions by teachers underestimating my academic abilities, teachers relying on the few Black students to teach our peers about racism, or students feeling like they had the right to speak negatively about my hair. I remember when I was younger, my mom always made it a point for me to understand that I was different, to love my hair, to understand that Piedmont may never feel like a safe space for me, but it was going to give me opportunities that I wouldn't find elsewhere. She wanted me to understand that it was a privilege to be in this space, but she wasn't able to fully understand the burden that I felt firsthand. Although I could match all of my peers materialistically, there were always so much ignorance and underlying superiority. It felt like I could be the exception since I wasn't as Black, but as soon as they were able to realize the difference in culture and parenting, my braids, or the fact that I simply didn't wash my hair as often as they did due to my hair texture, I became foreign. Someone that they never wanted to get to know anyways. Although it may not be the blunt racism, such as saying the N-word to my face, the subtleties of simply leaving me out, or making sure that I knew what set me apart from everyone else was heartbreaking. It completely ruined the way that I saw myself. It made me grow to become ashamed of my Blackness. I didn't want to be the exception, I just wanted to be me. It just feels like when I walk into any given room in Piedmont, there was always this constant heavy energy. No one there to validate my feelings when I feel uncomfortable with a situation, but I finally come to realize that I have to be that person for myself. I have now come to realize that being Black is a privilege. Being Black is the best part of me. I want everyone to acknowledge that, but not treat me differently because of it. Now that I reflect on all of this, I realize how desensitized I was to it. I always chalked up my friends' behavior to them not liking my personality or just not understanding, but in reality, I have the right to feel how I felt. I have the right to feel angry about my environment. I have the right to simply want things to change for the Black girls that will come after me. I stand here today and I share my story so that each person sitting here has a better understanding of the perspective of a minority student. For those young Black students out there, I'm here to tell you that you're going to get through it, as much as it may seem like it's a never-ending losing battle. But you have to make sure to surround yourself and become part of a community outside of Piedmont. Make friends with those that look like you and understand you. It will help you to learn more about yourself and not feel suffocated by this community if you are exposed to a world outside of it. Make sure that you believe that you deserve to fill the space that you do. Love who you are and don't be ashamed of it. Lastly, talk to your parents. Listen to their advice. They're filled with wisdom and comfort. They understand, so just be willing to listen. We as a community need to learn how to step into each other's shoes and be willing to do better and create an environment where everyone can thrive, not just survive. I want this taste of my experience to spark a willingness to listen and to truly empathize with those around you. I hope that each of you sitting here truly commit to being aware, educated, and willing to teach those around you. We can no longer stand by and let these feelings linger within minority students. We need to be dedicated to being a true ally. We need to create safe spaces and be part of the solution, not the problem. So once we leave this room, let's go out there and do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan and Stephanie and Seb. Really inspiring. So for those of you who may not know, these students are part of the Affinity Mentorship class and program where they are personally changing the lives of the young students in our district. A lot of them meet during the week and weekends with students who hold similar identities, and we have started going into classrooms at the elementary and the middle school to teach lessons on bias and gender identity, but really their motivation is for change. They want to know that there are adults and other peers and teachers who understand what the issues are so that we can actually start to build a more inclusive environment. So is it okay if we enter into the panel part of it now? Ina and I are going to ask some questions and we're just going to pass the mic. You ready to do this? Okay. All right. So here's our first question. It's about climate and culture. And the question is this: what is the climate and culture of your current school? What about your elementary and middle school years and even high school years do you want to highlight? How does the climate and the culture affect you academically, socially, and emotionally? It's all yours.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is definitely a multifaceted question with many aspects to it, but one of them is Piedmont has a culture of indifference. What I mean by that is when an act of intolerance does occur, I feel that administration handles it in a way that oftentimes doesn't bring attention to the issue at all, or handles it in a very negligent manner. This has a chain reaction of impacts. It doesn't allow the community to process the impact of these acts of intolerance, and because of that, in a way, a lot of us have been, like Morgan was speaking to earlier, have been desensitized to these acts of hate due to how often we hear about them, but also how not seriously they are handled. And I think this also speaks to the social climate in Piedmont. There are certain groups at PHS that are okay with and indifferent to, or even use themselves, racial slurs, and groups of students who will cover up for these people for popularity. They will cover for these people in these groups, just, for popularity. And so there's no social accountability in this aspect. And like I mentioned earlier, no lack of administrative accountability as well. Now I would say, if you had asked me this question maybe 1 week earlier, that this climate and culture is especially prevalent in the middle and high school. But recently, actually last week, we went into an elementary school, we went into Wildwood to teach a lesson on interrupting racism. And we did the lesson, we divided into small groups, and in these circles, in these restorative justice circles, students revealed how familiar they are with racial slurs. And that was incredibly surprising to me because that was, thankfully, not my experience in Wildwood or in elementary school. But it just goes to show that these issues are impacting younger and younger students, and they're having to face them at younger and younger ages. So that's just a way that everyone needs to step up and do their part to hold other students accountable for their actions and creating a more inclusive community.
Okay, hi. I'm Danny, and I'm a transgender student too. I want to talk about the culture of bullying at Piedmont. I feel like Piedmont's very comfortable with bullying, even something as stupid as like being vegetarian. People threw hot dogs at me in elementary school, and I guess they thought it was funny. Maybe it was funny, but there was a lot of bullying, and I feel like when people are comfortable with bullying for like being vegetarian, they're also really comfortable with bullying for other parts of identity. And like, yes, this happens in other schools, but I feel like because of the competition at Piedmont, people want to put others down, and so bullying is like definitely more of a thing here. Also, toxic masculinity is a thing in Piedmont. There's a lot of gay jokes on sports teams, and sometimes I don't know whether they're just being funny or if they're homophobic, and I don't know what to say about it. I don't know whether to like laugh along or to like say, hey, that's not cool, you shouldn't do that. People also aren't really open to corrections, like correcting pronouns or something. It's classmates, but it's also teachers. I've been in, groups with girls, and teachers have been like, oh, you girls over there, and I'm like, I'm trans, not a girl, but I didn't say it because I was like afraid of what they would say back to me, so I just let it slide, I guess. But I feel like people need to be more open and have conversations about this so people aren't sad all the time.
Testing. Okay. My name is Cole Nash. You might have noticed I'm white. I'm a male. And I'm up here today because I'm also Jewish, and my friend Oliver and I have a Jewish mentorship group with some younger kids in the community. And I also have, a good perspective I can provide. So, firstly, when it comes to climate and culture, I want to talk about some of the positive things that we have in Piedmont, because it is, a really nice place, and my experience, as a white person has been overall really positive since I've been here, since kindergarten. I think the teachers in this community are especially strong, and I think that really facilitates a positive culture or contribution to the culture and the climate. I think the size of Piedmont as a district, and especially as a high school, kind of brings this close-knit feeling where you know everybody, or you at least know a good amount of people in the community, and that's comforting. And thirdly, on the positive side of things, I think Piedmont is generally a really friendly place, and you see this just walking around campus and talking to your teachers and your friends, and even people you don't even know. But on the other side of this coin of the culture and the climate, you have a lot of problems. First of all, I want to talk about the academic pressure that students feel. A lot of teachers, a lot of parents put pressure on students to do well academically, so they can go to a good college or university, and I think some of that pressure is good, but there's also a huge amount of pressure put on by peers to do well academically. And this, I think, causes this really negative, stressful, anxious environment, which contributes to some of the other things we've talked about as well. Secondly, I think that there's this athletic pressure in Piedmont, which kind of relates to the academic pressure, in that, at the high school, it's 800 kids around. We have a lot of teams when it comes to sports, and I think peers put a lot of pressure on each other to pursue athletics when they don't necessarily feel, that they should join sports. Me, personally, I've always loved sports. I played them when I was little. I played lacrosse my freshman, my sophomore year, and now as a junior I play golf, and I love sports. But I know a lot of people that feel this peer pressure to play sports, and I think that's a really negative side of the culture. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about what other people have been talking about and what this is really about, and that's the reputation that Piedmont is or has. And when you talk to somebody outside of Piedmont, they kind of discuss with you that Piedmont has this vibe or this culture or this climate, you could say, that's a little bit racist or anti-LGBTQ. And I think that this is really important to address, and that's why we're here to talk about that. And I think something that happens inside of Piedmont is that these racist ideas, these anti-LGBTQ ideas get perpetuated by the students, because there's articles written about it, and there's all sorts of things picked up by the media, and I think it's really important that we recognize as a student body that we have problems when it comes to race, and we have problems when it comes to the LGBTQ community, and students shouldn't feel, or students shouldn't perpetuate these ideas. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sophia. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm going to be speaking more personally about how the culture at Piedmont has personally affected me. So growing up in this primarily white neighborhood as a Mexican and Black identifying student, I found myself pressured to disprove a lot of the negative stereotypes that a lot of individuals that have my similar ethnicity or nationality are associated with. And thus, I pushed myself to get to know my teachers and create personal relationships with them and strove for academic excellence, and have always tried to become involved in different aspects of our community so that I could be seen for who I truly am. And since then, it's become my focus to prove that I'm more than what meets the eye. I wanted the content of my character to be someone's first thought of me, and not the color of my skin or the texture of my hair. And so today, I hope that people know me for what I'm capable of and what I'm passionate about and what I stand for and believe in, and not necessarily my ethnicity, my nationality, or just my appearance in general. And so I think that as a community, we need to continue to support students like me in growing and discovering who they are, but also following a lot of their passions and continuing to pursue what they actually believe in and be in alignment with who they are.
I guess I have to push it. There we go. So you've spoken, I think, quite eloquently about culture, and just the social network that you guys have, right? Your social climate, what's the way that you experience being here. So what we want to think about next is accountability. And part of what we're interested in, what you're thinking about, is what does Piedmont's system of accountability look like? And then the second part of the question is, what about from an administrative perspective in the school district? And I'll say just, because I've had the experience of being able to work both with you and also with administrators, that sometimes from the administrative end, it's a lot more complicated, and they can't always share everything, so kind of bearing that in mind as you're thinking about how you respond to the questions. So I think, Meher, you're going first?
So I'll start off by saying that Piedmont has a very long history of pushing racist and harmful events that have happened in its past under the rug and brushing it under the rug. This carries over to the way I think administration reacts to acts of intolerance. I understand that there's a lot more that goes into it. But I just want to answer this question by sharing a personal experience that I have that speaks to the accountability aspect and also the administration aspect. So I was called in by my middle school counselor to attest to an instance that had happened to my friend. And the person who was the aggressor in this situation, I let my counselor know that this was a person who has sexually harassed many women and who has used racial slurs, continues to use them on a daily basis in class, uses homophobic slurs on a daily basis. And she basically told me that I need more people to come in and testify to what you're saying, even though multiple people had already gone in. And I understand that. And multiple people went in after the fact. However, the end of the school year comes around and nothing has been done. And that I've seen carry over at the high school, and it's definitely frustrating as a student to not have that level of accountability that we wish we had. That's just my experience. Hi, my name is Dahlia. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Middle Eastern American. Kind of like what Meher said, I think that the administration often minimizes acts of intolerance, and I believe that if the school doesn't take initiative, how will these students that are doing these things see any repercussions for their actions? How can they know that what they're doing is really wrong without anything back from the school? And I also think that a lot of the students that are brave enough to come forward and be vulnerable to the administration may feel a bit silenced or unheard when they don't see anything happen after what they've just told people. I also have a story about when I was in middle school. I was in 7th grade at PMS. There were 3 girls in the grade above me that were making fun of my body continuously. And it got to the point where I felt so uncomfortable that I went to one of the counselors. And I had a conversation with her. I talked about my situation. And she called the girls in, talked to them, and all I heard was that they were told to stay away from me. And when I heard this, I obviously didn't believe that it was going to happen, and they kept coming up to me and saying more things, making me incredibly uncomfortable. And the entire situation just made me feel really upset because I was so vulnerable. I shared something that I never wanted to tell anybody about, and I didn't have anybody that was helping me or making me feel safe in my own community and at my own school with people that I will see every single day. So I think that students need to hold themselves accountable, and I think that if someone sees something or finds themselves saying something to themselves, they have to reflect on that, and nobody should ever be afraid to speak out against something, no matter if they feel like it's not cool or popular. I think it's a lot more important that we make Piedmont a safe place for everyone than it is to worry about your social status.
Hi everyone, my name is Elena. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior at the high school. I also wanted to touch a little bit about administrative response, more on the communication end in terms of different incidences. We've had a lot, unfortunately, recently, and just within the past couple of years, especially after COVID. I'm in the journalism class, and I recently wrote something about this, just about email communication from them and then acknowledging incidences when they happen. A lot of times the student body isn't notified at all, it's just the parents or just the teachers, and it's really important that as students we are informed when things like this happen, because it directly affects us. And as we are the ones who want to be a part of the change and are trying to help create change, I think it's really important that admin keeps us in the loop and enables us to be able to talk with our peers and have these important conversations where we can, try to come up with solutions, because I think the kids are going to be a big part of the solution. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was social accountability within the student body, because that is a huge, complex issue that no one really has the answers to. But just speaking from personal experience, my middle school experiences, even some now in high school, there are situations where there's the same group of kids, or the same kid specifically, who is an aggressor and continues to use harmful language, harass people, use slurs, all that kind of stuff. And the issue with Piedmont is that we all know each other, and everyone directly knows who each of these kids are and is able to identify them, but nothing is done partly because of the closeness of our community. And so, people distance themselves from these kids for a certain period of time, and then suddenly they're back in the culture like nothing ever happened. And so I think talking and trying to figure out ways to fix this and try to hold people accountable and make sure that they've actually changed, because change isn't just, putting a time limit on it and saying you're in timeout for 6 months and then you're back in. We need to find ways where kids are actually held accountable and make sure that they understand what they've done wrong and are able to move forward and become a part of helping fix the solution rather than just ignoring it.
I feel really hopeful that our future is in their hands. Do we agree? I mean, come on now. Let's move into our next question, which is about SLURS and microaggression. Here's a question for you all. What has been your experience with SLURS and microaggression? why do you think they remain prevalent? And talk about it at the middle school, high school level, and maybe even elementary if that pertains to you.
I'm going to start by talking about my experience in elementary school. So I moved to Piedmont when I was 6 years old. I had moved from a much more diverse community, so Piedmont was definitely a culture shock. A couple hours into the day at recess, I found out that I was one of 2 Indian people at the entire school. 2 hours into the school day, I was asked, where do you really come from? Like, where do you come from? When I explained that I was born in America, I had moved around a bunch, but now I'm here, they would not take that for an answer, and they repeatedly asked me, no, but like, where are you really from? And I just didn't know how to answer the question because I didn't know, like I'd given them the answer in multiple different ways, but they wouldn't take it. And then finally they asked, well, where's your family from? And then I understood. And this person followed up by saying, well, you know, you have an accent, you have darker skin, like you can't be from America. And I was like, I was very confused. And that was kind of the first experience that I had with microaggressions, and I now know, because of the work that we're doing in this program, I can identify that as ethnic racism. With the first 3 years of elementary school, really, I was asked when I would bring lentils and rice to school, why are you eating bugs? And that was, again, another thing that confused me a lot, because no matter how much I tried to explain to them, they would be very weirded out by my food that I would bring for lunch. But these were very new changes to me in Piedmont and overwhelming. So I adapted. I found ways to, you know, hide the parts of me that would get teased for, or, you know, I would get picked on for. Because when you are 6 years old, your version of adapting is kind of just assimilation, you know. The way that played out in my experience was just, like I mentioned, hiding those parts of me and not wanting to express them in my school setting. It's taken a very long time in this district to not be ashamed of the food that I bring to school because of what kids around me say about it, to have the want to talk about my culture and religion and holidays, to provide like a thorough explanation of why my hair is so long. Another thing that I think a lot of us here have faced and still face is getting called the wrong name. We were one of 2 Indian girls at the school, and we got mixed up all the time, and it made me so mad because my white classmates who shared similar facial features never had that issue. Every teacher could assign them with their correct name and identify them, but they couldn't do that for us, even though we were 2 people in the class. Speaking, lastly, I've been talking for a while, on why these issues remain prevalent, I think, frankly, it's because of a lack of education. I won't get into this too much, but I think India and many cultures in non-Western regions of the world are severely underrepresented in the school's curriculum, and I think we need to have a lot of education around that so that people from different religions or cultures or backgrounds don't feel othered in the community.
Hi, my name is Adelia Mbise. I'm a freshman at Millennium High School, and I identify as an African American woman from Tanzania. Throughout my years in Piedmont schools, I have heard and experienced many slurs and microaggressions and just hate in general to students of color. As a middle school student, I experienced much of this hate. In the beginning of 6th grade, there was a white student who had said that I was his slave and that my white friend was his princess. This was the first very racist experience that I've had in the Piedmont schools. Early in my 8th grade year, a group of 6th graders came up to me and they began throwing gang signs at me like I was affiliated in a gang, even though I've never been part of like any kind of gang in my entire life. Many black students, including me, were being called gorillas, monkeys, and even the N-word sometimes. And it just felt very dehumanizing and horrible. And the sad thing was that we would like experience this every day at school. I think that many students of color who were victims of these jokes never realized how racist they were, and so these students were continuously victimized every day at school. Many teachers would talk about slavery and civil rights, but did not know how to relate to me, and I felt like because of this, they would teach these subjects by just ignoring me, while everyone in the classroom would just stare at me. This made me feel very uncomfortable. I remember thinking that I wanted there to be at least one other black student in my class, so I wouldn't feel less isolated and alone. I remember coming home from school feeling very horrible and just withdrawn about everything that was happening to me at the middle school. And I would beg my mother to send me to Oakland Tech or Berkeley High or Bishop O'Dowd, literally just any other school with more black students and black teachers. I think the reason I switched to Millennium was because I knew that it was a much more diverse environment, and there would be way more black students and black teachers. And now I would say I'm much more happier there, and I do not experience any racial aggression that I've experienced in the middle school or the elementary school. I felt like I had to move schools, and this is unfair. Any student should feel comfortable in the school they go to, no matter their race.
Okay. So when it comes to slurs and microaggressions, I think we're getting really close to what one of the main problems is at Piedmont, which has been, I mean, throughout, when I think through my years at Piedmont, you know, I've seen and I've experienced, and even, you know, when I was younger, even times I participated in name calling and using language that's not appropriate. And I think when we came out of 5th grade, a lot of us went to Piedmont Middle School. It was kind of this time where there was a lot of confusion of what's going on. You know, they say like your body's changing, your mind is changing, you're talking to new people, you're meeting new people, and people are learning about all sorts of words that they don't know the meaning to, you know, and they're especially mean during that time. And I'm not saying that we should excuse these words that people say when they're younger. I think what we need to do is educate people starting at the youngest age possible when it comes to what language they can use and what language they shouldn't use. And I think that should stem from education at school as well as at home from the parents. But then as students get into high school and you start to take more accountability for yourself, I think we need to have more accountability. I think whenever something is said, you know, some sort of slur, microaggression, or any language that makes someone feel uncomfortable for the way, you know, they were created, it's something they can't control, I think there needs to be accountability for that by the administration and socially by people's peers. And I think that's really, really important.
So, you know, I want to say that I just am in such awe of all of you, because even with everything that you've experienced, you're here and you're willing to share, and your resilience, I think, just is huge. And I think that comes from having each other to some degree, you know, being able to have a way to talk about what you've experienced is one way to sort of heal a bit, to think about how you can move forward and maybe help other students not have the same experience, which is what a lot of you do as mentors. So kind of sticking with the theme of personal experience, What is your personal experience in Piedmont schools holding the particular identities that you do?
I've grown up in Piedmont my whole life, and there are a lot of stories that my parents tell me, like when I was younger, like when I was in first grade, I was put in like a lower reading level than I actually was, and my mom always was like, okay, you gotta read, you have to make sure that you're put in the right level, and I think there's a lot of stories that I get told, and I kind of just blocked it out. I don't remember a lot of the things that happened in my early like elementary school years. It's just like kind of difficult to come to terms that like I don't know. And I think that once I became older, as like in middle school, I finally came to realize like I wanted to be exactly like my peers. I wanted to be just like the skinny girls that I saw when I walked through the halls. I didn't like who I was, and that kind of ruined how I saw myself, how I perceived everything, how I perceived my community, and I think that needs to change. I think we need to have things in our curriculum. We need to reinforce the fact that everyone deserves to be in the skin that they are, and we need to have more exposure to all types of beauty, all types of different things, and not just one like stereotype or one certain like look.
So I was born in Cancun, Mexico, and I lived there until I was 10 years old. I'm 18 now, so I've lived here for a while. But being Mexican and growing up in a beautiful community, I was incredibly proud to be who I was. I was secure in my Mexican identity. And it wasn't until I moved to the States, to Piedmont, that I experienced a lot of cultural isolation, confusion, and even shame surrounding my identity. And I think it was mostly self-inflicted, but I do think there is part of it is attributed to the fact that Piedmont is a primarily white neighborhood. As Morgan was speaking on, there's lack of representation in the curriculum, and so I felt as though I needed to assimilate into the American lifestyle, and I quickly began to lose sight of my Mexican identity. I changed how I pronounced my last name and made it easier for my peers to say it, but I also, as Mahir was saying, brought different types of food to school so that I could fit in and be one of the same. And so this, as I said earlier, caused a great sense of confusion, isolation, and shame surrounding who I was. And I was often asked where I came from, why I had an accent, where my family was from, what I was. And as a 5th or 6th grader, I honestly couldn't answer the question myself. And even in middle school, my peers would joke about, the construction of the U.S.-Mexican border wall, and I would often just laugh along because I had no idea what to say. And as a 6th grader and a middle schooler, I also just wanted to be accepted and fit in, and as Dahlia said earlier, just fit in. And for a while, I just went along with that, and I think it wasn't until the pandemic that I took the time to reflect and redefine what it meant to be me, especially in this community. And being away from my Mexican family and not being able to go to Mexico, I think that's what allowed me to find myself and redefine my Mexican identity. And I think that has immensely manifested in a lot of the different things that I've been able to pursue throughout my high school career. So though there were a lot of negative things throughout my life, this growth has allowed me to become a part of this amazing program and help a lot of the youth in this community to grow confident in who they are and celebrate their differences. And so, though I wish I hadn't experienced a lot of the things that I did, I'm grateful on one half that I had those moments, those negative moments, because now I'm able to look back and help, little people be confident and proud of who they are. And yeah, I really honestly wouldn't change anything because of that.
So I've told my life story a few times for various reasons. In elementary school, I dressed more masculine. I liked wearing long shorts. They weren't fashionable. They were pretty ugly, but it made me feel like a boy. I got a haircut. It was awful. It was all the way to the side, like Justin Bieber look. It wasn't the vibe, but middle school for me sucked. It sucks for everyone. Sorry for anyone who's in middle school right now or anyone who's going to be in middle school, because it's really awful, and especially when you don't really like yourself, it's kind of hard to socialize, have friends, and mental illness and transness get along very well, which is inconvenient for me. I had a lot of anxiety issues. I also got bullied for that, in addition to my vegetarianism and then veganism in middle school. People would, try to feed me dairy. I'm lactose intolerant. I don't see why that's a thing that someone would do. But middle school is awful. And I feel like people say things not knowing what they mean. People were mean to me in middle school, and now I'm friends with them, and it's okay, because they've grown as people. But I feel like little kids just need to know to not say mean things. Just be nice, and then people won't have that hard of a time. In high school is when I transitioned, which is exciting, yay for me. And after that happened, I was much happier with myself. It was pretty great. And now I'm talking in front of you guys, which I would never ever do in middle school. It was hard for me to order lunch. It would stress me out so much. But I feel like just being comfortable with my identity is something that I've had to deal with, and it's been helpful to have great family and friends to help me with that. Yay!
Again, my name is Adelina. Before I moved to Piedmont, I grew up in Tanzania and went to an international school there. It was mostly Black, African, and I felt very, very comfortable there, and because there were so many people who looked like me, and I was just learning so much about my African identity there. And then when I was in 3rd grade, I moved to Houston, Texas, and I also attended a very diverse school there. And I also felt very comfortable there just from moving from Africa. When I was in 4th grade, I moved to Piedmont, and I was the only, and immediately I noticed that I was the only Black student in my class, and there was no other Black teachers and any Black staff. Even though I had a friend group at the time, I felt very alone with my identity. And like I said earlier, I encountered lots of racism throughout my years in Piedmont. And in middle school, when I tried to talk to the administration about what was happening to me, the school administration, I don't think they really knew how to help me, and they made many mistakes in the process of trying to help me, and it just made me feel even more uncomfortable and more terrible. And in the end, I felt like the only people that really helped me was the DEI consultants and the Wellness Center.
I've grown up in Piedmont for my whole life, and throughout that time, I've always felt a lot of separation from others, not because of the way that my friends would treat me, but just because internally I felt like I could never really find a place for myself. I was always left out for not looking the same as others, and I was compared to different girls for my body type or certain facial features that I have. I was ridiculed for having darker facial hair. I was told that I looked dirty or that I had a caterpillar above my lip. Most students, I convinced myself that most students weren't saying these things to hurt me, but regardless, these incidents have caused me to develop a lot of deep-rooted insecurities about the way that I look, and specifically hyper-focus on certain things that may make me look a little bit different. In elementary school, I was once asked by one of my teachers to elaborate on Middle Eastern culture, which made me feel really uncomfortable because I didn't feel qualified to talk about my supposed culture, and especially because I wasn't doing it out of my own willingness to educate my peers, but because the teacher put me on the spot. It's these moments that I reflect on and wish that I had an outlet to relate to, because I would frequently invalidate my own feelings and point to it as just being overdramatic. I hope that other students don't silence themselves in the way that I had, and I think that it's really important that everyone feels heard and respected by their own community, no matter their differences. So I think that what this group is doing is really important for the younger generations, because they'll be able to relate to people above them and talk about the things that they're struggling with, something that I really wish that I would have had when I was younger.
I think the audience will be in agreement with me when I say that there's a weightiness to what we're hearing, isn't there? A lot of what we're hearing is hard to listen to, and it's heavy, and I want to encourage us to lean in and really allow their truth to settle into what they're saying. Because until we acknowledge the truth, we're unable to make change. And so we're down to our last two questions of the night. You're doing so great. Is anybody really thirsty, by the way? I'm sorry I didn't bring you water. If you are, sorry. So our next question, our fifth and sixth question, are really about advice for all of you. The reason maybe why we're here. This question is advice for those who are parents, but I think it's relevant for those who are teachers, right? Because in some ways, we're growing young people, and we want to know how to grow kind and empathetic people. So here's our question. What conversations do you wish parents and teachers have with kids about these issues? How can parents and teachers be allies and also raise allies?
So my answer to that is to teach your kids to be open and nice. I know it seems simple, but kids really do copy what their parents say. Some little kids will say things that they don't know what it means. They'll say, "Oh, you're wearing nail polish, you're a girl," to a boy, and that's not what that means. So, just teaching that people can express themselves however they want. It doesn't mean they're another gender. And also your kid probably isn't trans. Not many people are. But still be nice to them. If they want to do something that you wouldn't expect them to do, let them do it. As long as it's not hurting anyone, it's fine. And as my mom says, kindness matters. And what that means is kindness works. It helps make good decisions. It helps with conversations. It helps understanding other people with empathy. And it also helps relieve stress and anxiety. So instead of fear, you should lead with love. Yay!
Obviously, I completely agree with everything Danny said. And then, adding on to that, I think a lot of times when we're talking with parents, we obviously want to emphasize certain words and slurs and inappropriate terms that are obviously not okay to use. But I think beyond that, it has to be about mindset and overall how you just treat a person. And so it's more than just teaching them that there are certain off-limit phrases, but it's also how you kind of guide how they view other people and how they view the world and their peers. I think we've talked a lot about race, but I wanted to tie back to something that Seb was talking about in the beginning in terms of sexism. And I know in middle school there was so much harassment that I kind of experienced, and I know a lot of girls that I was friends with and just people I talked to experienced from guys. And I think that all kind of ties back into mindset, how guys growing up view girls, how they view their peers. And so teaching them the values that they should have and how they should see other people is really important, not just what not to do and what not to say. And then my other point was kind of for everyone. We did an exercise in English recently where we gendered different words, which I thought was kind of interesting because I think recently a lot of things seem to be off limits, or teachers or parents are too scared to talk about certain things with their students because, you know, they can be taken out of context, they can be viewed as controversial, no one wants to get into trouble. But I really liked that we did that because it provided a space for the students to be able to talk about, you know, like, why are we assigning doctor to male? Why are we assigning nurse to female? And kids were able to openly talk about gender and stereotypes and all that kind of stuff without fear of judgment and without fear of, you know, being without fear of retribution, I guess. And so I think just providing those spaces for kids to be able to talk openly and for teachers to be able to talk openly and parents is also really important. And so I thought I would share that class thing because I thought it was really cool.
That was well spoken, Alana. And you, Danny. So I touched on this before, but I think it's really important to emphasize that parents need to have conversations with their kids starting at a young age about the words they can and can't say. Recently, I was looking at over the notes of one of my peers in the class, and they consistently used this one slur throughout their notes. And I said to them, I was like, hey, you know, you can't use that word. This word is not okay. And I explained the historical context to that. And they said, oh, I had no idea, you know, thanks for telling me that. Thank God I didn't say that in a class discussion. And I was thinking, like, wow, we really need to start talking about what we can and can't say to our kids, starting at a young age. I'm 17 years old. I'm a junior in high school. You know, I shouldn't have peers that are saying things that aren't okay to say or might affect the feelings of other people. I also want to talk about, I think this is something my parents caught me on when I was younger, and that was I wasn't totally consistent with my language across, all the people I was talking to. For example, when I talked to my parents, I acted a little bit differently than when I talked to my friends. Then I talked to my teachers, then I talked to, a police officer or a principal, right? And I think that it's important that parents try to see how their kids act when they're with their friends and when they're with other people, and address that with them to see if they're consistent and congruent across all the mediums they communicate, because it's important, especially to your identity, that you're consistent throughout life and that you're saying similar things to the same, or to everybody, and that you mean what you're saying and you're not changing to group, if that makes sense. I think that's really important.
I would also like to echo what everyone else is saying, but also that students need to be exposed to different kind of cultures. I think it's really important to understand and to love all the cultures that we're exposed to, because at a young age, we're learn to just like love other people and not to initially like be ignorant towards other people. And I think it's just important to be exposed to the culture that maybe your friends have, or the cultures that of the people that you're surrounded by, so that you're educated on it and it's not just like something new that you're learning about.
Before I go into the last question, I just wanted to make sure, does anyone else have any advice that they want to share? Because I know, Morgan, that just came up for you.
I kind of want to echo what Morgan was saying. We know how, raising open-minded children can lead to a more inclusive community as a whole, but there's a certain impact on a personal level that is so special. Like I mentioned earlier, when I brought food to school that other people didn't know, there were these two girls who are still my best friends to this day, and they, instead of echoing what everyone else was saying, they were like, well, that actually smells and looks amazing. Can I try some? And that level of open-mindedness and inclusivity can have a lot more power than one realizes. Like if I was feeling embarrassed, that helped counter those feelings that I was facing and provided me a different perspective, or at least a more nuanced perspective of the comments that others were making to me. So I think that just goes to show the power of truly raising open-minded and inclusive kids, and yeah.
So our last question is thinking about, sort of in the same vein, giving advice to parents here. So the experience from your own family, what conversations did your parents have with you that were helpful, and what conversations do you wish they might have had with you?
Growing up, I didn't have many conversations with my parents about my identity, and I think this is because I didn't seek them out. I wasn't really interested in embracing parts of my identity that made me feel different, so I thought that by suppressing them and hiding them or altering them to make me look different, I would turn myself into something that I can never really be. I really wish that I had initiated conversations with my parents and my grandparents, just because I know that I would have benefited from them and been able to grow and kind of combat all of the insecurities that I am now trying to deal with. And I really hope that other people will talk about the things that, about the things that make them different in a good light, and not in a way that makes them different, but in a way that makes them feel unique. Because I think that labeling something as different kind of makes it bad, but it doesn't have to be that way. It just depends on the way that you look at them.
Well, even before I moved to Piedmont, my mom, who's sitting in the audience today, has always told me to never let anyone define who I am, what I can achieve, who I want to be. And though people may question my credibility or intelligence because of my appearance, I know now that I deserve to be in the space that I am in, as long as I worked hard for that position or opportunity that I realized. And no one can take that away from you as long as I said, you've worked hard for it. And so, just to keep it succinct, just tell your kids that they're worthy in spite of and because of their specific and unique identities.
I think that a lot of the conversations that I had with my parents was kind of just reinforcing the fact that I deserved to be where I was. And I think it was kind of difficult because, as you were saying, I suffered a lot from imposter syndrome. I didn't believe that I deserved to be there. And I think a lot of times I was like, oh, I want to leave here, like I want to transfer, I can't be here anymore. But I think that being in this environment has truly like made me a stronger individual, and it's helped me to kind of like understand who I am and empathize with other people. And I think that's really important to have going like in the future. And I think a lot of people need to kind of learn from that, learn to see things in other people's perspectives and to not be as like ignorant and not willing to understand what other people are going through.
I think I really resonated with what Dahlia was talking about. I don't think that I had as many conversations as I should have, and I think that's because I'm mixed. I'm half white, half Chinese, and my dad grew up in Piedmont, and he's white, and so I think as soon as we moved here, it was kind of about following his mold of what Piedmont was for him and immersing myself in kind of the whiteness of Piedmont and Piedmont's culture, because it is predominantly white. And I think that when you have a part of yourself that identifies with the majority, which for me is my white half, I think that it's easy to latch onto that and become solely focused on that, and so it becomes really easy to kind of ignore the other part of yourself, the minority part of yourself. And that's kind of what happened for me, and I think we try to like celebrate different Chinese holidays and obviously eat the food and, you know, do our best to keep the culture. But yeah, I think it's easy to lose that part of yourself in a community like Piedmont, and I think finding communities like clubs and different celebrations, there's the different organizations within Piedmont put on, was really helpful so that I could connect with people who have similar identities, and I was able to find small ways to celebrate like that when the rest of the time I'm kind of distancing myself. So I think that was really helpful for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the students. Thank you to everybody who came tonight. I'm Heather Frank. I am the Executive Director of the Piedmont Education Foundation. My pronouns are she, they, and I was really honored to be able to help bring this evening about. So I want to give a big thanks to Jean Takasawa, Ina Bendich, and Sarah Karras. I'm 45 years old. I'm never going to have the poise that these young people do right now. So I want to say a big thank you to Morgan Hunt, Stephanie Tsang, Sohrab F, Danny Allen, Mary Bacher, Sophia Prieto Black, Adelina Mabise, Cole Nash, Dahlia Safori, and Alanya Stevens.